The poster boy of the Street Fighter series has always been known for one thing, the Hadouken. His fireballs have been his signature move for the past iteration of Street Fighter games, and he's no different here in Street Fighter V. When it comes to learning the fundamentals of Street Fighter, I think Ryu is still the perfect character, even in the context of this game. I know you may have been hearing the total opposite because the meta doesn't really work with him, but Ryu has always been a character about outplaying your opponent through reads and spacing. His neutral scored average here because the fireball and the uppercut do play sufficient roles in the neutral, so it makes up for his short and stubby normals. His movement is also average too, his walk speed is enough to get around, and his dashes are decent too. He has the tools to help players learn the game, but then I feel he comes short once you start playing at higher levels because the meta seems to severely hurt him. I am aware I mentioned the meta twice just now, so just to be clear, when I say the meta, I feel that the strongest characters typically have hard to block non-generic mix-ups, robbery V-triggers, and reliable crush counter buttons, which I feel Ryu severely lacks in all of those areas. Having said that, in the right hands, Ryu can still be deadly, but you have to be a reactive and reads-based player. If you're looking for characters with crazy mix-up shenanigans or amazing pressure, Ryu might not be your cup of tea. Standing Light Punch is his fastest normal. He generally can't convert too much off of it unless it's counter hit. It's a good normal to challenge your opponent's Oki game or to challenge your opponent's pressure. Crouching Light Punch hits a frame slower than the Standing Light Punch, and it's generally only used as a combo starter. Jumping Light Punch is a fast air normal that's good for stopping jump-ins. Standing Light Kick is arguably Ryu's best normal in the neutral. It starts fast, recovers fast, and you can convert off of it into a special move. The range is pretty decent for a light normal as well. Crouching Light Kick is a good normal to use if you want to catch your opponent with a quick hitting low attack. Jumping Light Kick is arguably Ryu's best cross-up attack. It has an ambiguous hitbox, but it has less hit stun, but it has enough to convert into a full combo. Standing Medium Punch is your go-to bread and butter combo starter. You can also use it as a pressure tool, but be mindful that it leaves a bit of gap in your block string, being only +1 on block. This means it can be interrupted if you try to throw a move that's slower than 3 frames. Crouching Medium Punch is a long-reaching move that can be special cancelled. In some circumstances, it can also be a combo starter, though in neutral this is rare. Jumping Medium Punch puts the opponent in a juggle state. You can combo into Air Tatsu or into EX Shoryuken on the ground. If you want to combo into Tatsu, the most consistent way is to cancel it from the first hit. It is possible to convert it from the second hit, but it is a bit specific in terms of spacing. In general, I don't really find this move to be too reliable. Standing Medium Kick is Ryu's longest reaching poke. It can be useful to pester your opponent with it, but it can be risky too in the neutral. It's good to use if you want to pop the opponent with V-trigger though. And this is Ryu's most patent normal, the Crouching Medium Kick. It has its uses in the neutral for poking this into a fireball, but it's not a true block string. Jumping Medium Kick is Ryu's cross-up normal. It has good hit and block stun and, well, it's a jumping cross-up. Standing Hard Punch is a poopy crush counter button. You can chain it to Standing Hard Kick or be juggled into off of a crush counter. It can be used as a poke when Ryu has V-trigger active, because it can only be special cancelled when V-trigger is on, but be mindful of the recovery. Crouching Hard Punch can be used as an anti-air. It doesn't knock down though, but in the heat of the moment it can be nice to have. Just don't expect your opponent to respect your anti-air game too much because there's no knockdown and therefore no real setup. On the ground, the Crouching Heavy Punch also forces stand, which can be useful for certain combos. Jumping Heavy Punch is a heavy jump in normal. What can I say, you punch your opponent's skull with it. Yay! Standing Hard Kick is Ryu's best crush counter button. It's usually used to punish reversals or invincible uppercut moves. Be careful with this move though, because it will whiff against crouching opponents. Try not to use this move too much in the neutral because it tells your intentions really easily, that you're looking for crush counters. Even if you do land the crush counter, the damage you get from hitting it from afar is pretty poopy, so the reward isn't too good in the neutral. Crouching heavy kick is another long range poke, but it's massively punishable on block, even from max range, so don't go too trigger happy with this move. It does land you a hard knockdown from a crush counter, which can give you a guaranteed setup. Jumping heavy kick is, well, a jump in heavy normal. Cool. Have your opponent smell your barefoot. His forward medium punch is an overhead, and it's a pretty standard overhead. You can convert it to a combo from specific meaty timings. This can be punished on block, so try not to be too predictable with this move. His back hard kick is a good normal to use as a combo starter, because it actually forces stands, so you can usually do combos that you otherwise wouldn't be able to on a crouching opponent. It can also be used as a pressure tool. If you have your opponent in the corner, this is a good normal to use to pester your opponent. Forward heavy punch is a combo starter move. You can combo off of it into a crouching heavy punch for decent damage. It's minus on block though, so don't use this too much. The Hadouken is Ryu's signature move, and it's his best poke. The light version travels slow, the heavy version travels fast, and the medium is somewhere in between. EX Hadouken will knock down, and it's also safe on block. Because it's plus on block, it's actually really good for pressuring your opponent in the corner. We'll go over more of its usage in the neutral section. His Shoryuken is his go-to anti-air. The light version is invulnerable to throw, so outside of expecting a throw on your wake up, it's not too often used. The medium version is the go-to anti-air because it has invincibility against aerial attacks. The heavy version is a decent combo ender. It does have some invulnerability frames against strike moves. It's not frame 1, so it's not as consistent of an anti-air compared to his medium version. EX Shoryuken is fully invincible to pretty much everything, but your opponent has all day to punish you on block, so don't be too trigger happy with this move. His Tatsumaki Senpukyaku is also a decent combo ender. The light version travels not very far, but it gives you a free safe jump. The medium version travels a decent range and keeps you in front of your opponent. The heavy version travels a ridiculous distance, but you switch sides on impact. This move can be used to go over projectiles, but use this sparingly because you are punishable on block. And the reward for going over the projectile isn't as big as the punishment that you will receive if this is blocked. Also be mindful, the Tatsu will whiff on crouching opponents. The EX version has a vacuum effect and will suck the opponent in, so it's pretty useful if cancelled from a normal attack in the neutral. And here's his Jodan Sokuto Keri. I'm not gonna call it that because it's just too hard to call it, and I prefer to call it Donkey Kick, or the Danky Kick. It's a good special move to end your combos into because it is Ryu's only meterless special move that can cause knockdown on crouching opponents. The EX will cause a wall bounce that will let you combo into Shoryuken. His V-reversal is a pretty standard V-reversal. It will push the opponent away on impact, and you're not punishable on block. You can be thrown out of it, however, and the best time to not use it is off of a block jump in or a light normal, because these are often situations where you could be tick thrown. The V-skill is a parry. It's generally useful to punish moves that's either plus or unpunishable on block. Do keep in mind that this doesn't start up in frame 1, so the parry does require a really good time to use. Also on whiff, you're wide open and you're put in a counter hit state, so don't get too crazy with this move. Ryu's V-triggers as a whole aren't as good as the others because they lack the explosive comeback factors that some of the other characters have. They do have their share of effectiveness, just don't expect these to carry you in the match. V-Trigger 1 lets him shoot electric fireballs. They travel much faster and they knock down on hit. Every fireballs thrown do drain your V-Trigger gauge, so it's best not to throw these out willy-nilly. These fireballs can be charged, and if you fully charge and throw one, it will break your opponent's guard for a free combo. The charge time does take a while, so you leave yourself wide open if you're too predictable at this. His EX will charge up even faster and the guard break will grant more hit stun, but the glow is pretty telegraphed. The best way to utilize this is to use the threat of a fully charged fireball and tend to the jump. You can sometimes catch your opponent in their early jump frames and knock them down. Try to vary how much you charge before you throw one. If you vary the times constantly, it's really hard for your opponent to predict when you're going to throw a fireball, and this is a good way to play mind games with your opponent. Alright, here are some setups to help you get a guard break. Although, do keep in mind that all of these setups will have ways where it could be escaped. First off, this can be done off of a crush counter crouching hard kick. So first, get a crush counter crouching hard kick, and then cancel the V trigger, then with standing medium punch, and you can charge a heavy fireball all the way. If you did it correctly, the fireball will hit meaty. And the way you should see this is that the fireball should be in the middle of the character's body on impact. The downside to this is that it will lose to invincible reversals or supers. Here's another setup that is a bit safer. After cancelling into V-trigger off of a crush counter crouching hard kick, immediately backdash, walk back just a tiny bit, and then charge an EX fireball. The back movement should be very subtle and almost unnoticeable. If you timed it right, the EX fireball will break the opponent's guard. The downsides to this is that it requires manual timing, requires one bar, and most loopers will go right through the fireball. Okay, here's one more setup. If you do the target combo, which is standing medium punch, standing heavy punch, and then standing hard kick, you can cancel the last hard kick into V-trigger and then immediately charge and throw out an EX fireball. The downside to this is that if the opponent does not quick rise or back rise, you'd have to manually time the fireball, so opponents who know the setup would not rise up. Okay, here's one more thing about V-trigger 1. Using super wipes out your entire V-trigger gauge and your entire super meter for 30 more damage. I'm not saying you shouldn't use it at all if you get a combo opportunity, but man, that's a lot of your resources spent for a minimal damage boost. It will also guard break on block, but unless if you're in the corner, you really can't get much off of it. But even in the corner, you're not going to get much. But hey, your opponent can't punish you for it. V-trigger 2 is a better version of his V-skill. It's also a parry, but unlike the V-skill, which starts up in 3 frames, this one starts up in 2 frames. This is good because when your opponent leaves some gap in their block string, you can use this to interrupt their pressure. So once you plant this image in your opponent's head, he or she might try to stop pressuring you, and will try to bait you instead. So as long as you're not too predictable using this, use this parry as a fair method of getting your opponent to respect you. While I would say most characters have only one V-trigger that is truly useful to them, I'd say Ryu is a case of having 2 V-triggers that can cater to what you want. If you want a pressure tool that helps you out in the mid to close range neutral, V-trigger 1 is the choice for you. If you want a defensive V-trigger that can mess with your opponent's head, then V-trigger 2 is the way to go. Let's go over Ryu's core game plan in a general match. First, here are the moves to think about at their specific ranges. Fireballs are the core strategies with Ryu, and being able to utilize them properly requires good sense of spacing and timing. Even though the fireballs travel from one screen to the other, it's ill-advised to throw fireballs from far range, And by far range, I'm talking outside of Dawson's Standing Hard Punch range. The reason is that from this range, everyone can react to a fireball, and in some cases you can even be outright punished for throwing a single one. So instead of throwing fireballs from far range, try to throw them from mid to close distance because it becomes much more difficult for your opponent to deal with them. You want to be mixing up different speeds of the fireball to keep them on your toes. Even if they have a V-skill move that bypass fireballs, if you throw them at closer ranges, it's very hard to react accordingly. Remember that V-skills do not require you to do a motion, it's just 2 buttons pressed simultaneously. And throwing fireballs at close ranges still make V-skill attempts more difficult. So you can make someone mad by doing this. Ha 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 ha. When you're at this range, you must be mindful of jump-ins as well. It's key that you're able to anti-air properly while also chalking plasma. And the best thing to do at this range is to constantly be pumping the motion for the fireball to come out. When you keep pumping down and neutral, you're essentially starting up 2 different motions for the price of one, the Hadouken and the Shoryuken. If the opponent remains grounded, you can either choose to finish the fireball motion and throw it, or you can fake a fireball by simply not pressing anything. Usually the biggest tell of a fireball coming is the quick and subtle crouching animation, and you can catch people attempting a jump in just by crouching and standing. However, if you pump in neutral and your opponent happens to jump in, all you have to do is finish off the motion for the Shoryuken. The game's shortcut input system lets you do down forward motion twice to get you the uppercut. So if you're already inputting downwards motion, then it's just a really quick transition to finish off the input. In terms of anti-airing with uppercuts, most competitive players don't rely solely on reaction to anti-air. It's usually done with both spacing and anticipation in mind. So it's more about waiting and looking for the jump in rather than reacting to the moment the opponent jumps. Likewise, if you're focusing 100% of the time on anti-airing only, you tend to back yourself to the corner, and you can end up giving the opponent more ground. So your best bet is to shift focus between the ground approach and the air approach. Now, we can't just play neutral with fireballs, and we should probably consider using normals in the neutral too, right? Well, this game has a priority system built into it when normals interact. That means when 2 normals hit at the same frame, the move that is higher up in strength will always win. Taking into consideration of Ryu's short and stubby normal moves, I generally would advise against pressing too many buttons in the mid-range because that would leave you susceptible to crush counters. Plus, if you end up pressing too many buttons in neutral, it's a lot more difficult to play reactively, so it's usually best to stay passive and stick to poking with your fireballs in the neutral. Of course, I know, some of you guys love pressing buttons even at your own expense. Okay, you do have one button that can be useful in the neutral, and that's its standing light kick. It has decent range for a light normal, and it also recovers pretty fast. The ideal range to use this is to space yourself just outside of your opponent's poke range. You can use it to either interrupt a poorly timed normal, or punish a poorly spaced poke. Every standing light kick you throw out should come buffered with an EX Tatsu or a light donkey kick, because then you can convert it into wake up pressure. You want to input the buffer so that if the standing light kick doesn't connect, nothing happens, but if it does connect, the special move input does come out. If your opponent is respecting your fireball game, stay around the dash range because this can give you options. You can either use this to get in and apply pressure, and this is the perfect opportunity to use your other normals. You can even get a light confirm combo if you catch your opponent standing or attempting to take a throw. Oh, and speaking of throws, you can even forward dash and then backdash immediately to bait them too. And this is a good way to make your opponent cry. this section, I'm just going to go over some stuff that I didn't cover for the entire guide. First off, if you want to throw bait your opponent, which we in the FGC call the shimmy, the best way to start a shimmy is to press point blank Standing Light Punch. Standing Light Punch on block will keep you at the range where your throw will connect on block. So once you establish the tick throw setup, that's when you can go for the shimmy. Okay, here's another cool tip. It might not be completely practical in a real match, but hey, I'm just gonna share some tech with you. Ryu's EX Donkey Kick is usually followed up with Hard Punch Shoryuken, right? If you don't follow up, you get a near guaranteed meaty setup. The opponent cannot back rise after getting hit by EX Donkey Kick, and the setup is to dash up and then do his forward heavy punch. This will beat any 3-frame normal on wake up. Now if your opponent decided not to quick rise after the EX Donkey Kick, you leave considerable gap to meaty into a whiff medium punch and then a back hard kick. Alright, one last piece of strategy before I close this off. So I know there are a lot of characters that have the ability to change their jump trajectory, such as Ibuki, Falke, and Akuma, and therefore it makes your uppercut completely whiff or just not work. Don't be afraid to meet them air to air and hit them out of these situations. Remember, anti-airing is not done purely through reactions. Experienced players anti-air with use of spacing and anticipation. They're either looking for the jump in, or they're just waiting for it to happen, and then they react accordingly. Air to airs are the same deal. If you're able to sniff out the opponent's tendency to exploit a trajectory altering move, then just hit them out of it in the air. Thank you for watching, everybody. I personally think that while Ryu is a solid choice for beginners, experienced players will find Ryu limited because his playstyle just doesn't seem to fit the meta, and I actually do agree with them. That said, it's never a bad idea to have a pocket Ryu if you feel like your spacing and ability to read your opponent is lacking, but if you want to be competitive at this game, then you're going to struggle a lot. If you enjoyed this guide, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I know this is my first video among many I plan to make, so I highly ask you to put some suggestions and comments on how I can improve on my videos because I know this isn't perfect. I currently have several other videos lined up, with 2 other Street Fighter V characters I plan to make guides for, as well as about 2 or 3 Dragon Ball FighterZ character guides.